As we hop in today, first, I want to say, Happy Father's Day. Here we go. I can't really see you right now because the lights are a little dim, but I know there's fathers out there somewhere. And honestly, I have had the greatest joy of wearing the title of dad for the last 14 months. And so honestly, because I'm the one preaching, I brought a picture of my son for the slides up there. And so, hey, if you're like, whenever it shows up, if you're like, hey, well, how come he didn't show my kid? Well, this is my moment right here, okay? So enjoy the picture of my son. Honestly, I want to speak to the dads here really quick. Yeah, there he is. I love that guy. Yes, I call it a joy being a dad. And there are moments like when they don't sleep. There are moments like yesterday when we're eating at a restaurant, he decides that it's better for me to wear the avocado than for him to eat the avocado. Right? There are moments like that where you experience things as a dad, like him getting shots or hurting himself. And there's all these moments, but I still call it a joy. I still call it a joy. So dad, if you're here in the room, if you're a dad who's in the middle of that season where maybe it's hard, just remember that it's a joy. It's a joy to be able to raise your son, your daughter. It's a joy. We get to do this. It's an honor. And so it's an honor to be able to be dad. It's also an honor to be able to be here with you guys today, to be able to preach on such a special day. Hi, buddy. He's waving at me, so that's good. Hey, I just want to encourage you, dads. I know there are moments that this is difficult. There are moments that it's hard. And so actually, because dads, really, this isn't your kind of thing. If you're a dad in the room, would you just stand up really quick so that we can honor you as a church family? Y'all put your hands together for the dads. That's amazing. That's amazing. So dads, as you take a seat, let me encourage you, keep showing up. Keep being intentional. Y'all made him cry. Keep showing up. Keep being intentional. Your Heavenly Father has gifted you with such a purpose. And even if you're in the middle of I don't even know what my purpose is, if you're a dad, you have a glorious purpose. So live in it. It's an honor. It's a joy to be there. So now let's get into the real chunk of the message. If you've been with us for the past few weeks, you know that we've been going through the book of Daniel. And today we're actually going to be in Daniel chapter 5. All right, so Daniel chapter 5. If you want to go ahead, you can turn there if you want. Daniel chapter 5 is actually the story of a son. It's the story of a son. And if you have been with us these past couple of weeks, the setting and the storyline of today might sound a little bit familiar. And if it doesn't sound familiar, let me just put a shout out there. Go to our YouTube channel. Go watch the ones that you've missed. Because I'm telling you, the story of Daniel, the book of Daniel, there is so much good stuff in there for us to learn from. So if you missed one of our messages in this series, please go check that out. But today, we're going to have this story of a son. His name is Belshazzar. And in this story, he's actually the son, probably more than likely the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, and so here in this moment, here in this series that we've talked the first 4 chapters about King Nebuchadnezzar. And actually, if you were with us last week, we left off as he was a king, and then he turned into an animal like an ox that was grazing in the field, and then restored back into his kingdom once he humbled his heart. Right, and so here is a man, King Nebuchadnezzar, that has lots of issues, lots of faults, but there are moments where God showed up in his life. Right, and as a dad, as a father, as a man, as a king, I can only imagine him in his older age sitting down and beginning to pass on the things that he has learned to maybe his son, maybe other people, young men in the kingdom, trying to warn them, hey, you can live for your worldly pleasure. You can live for the things that you might find that bring you joy or contentment, or things that you may try to fill as some substitute. But let me tell you, it's not worth it. I can see him sitting there and telling that to the people that were coming up behind him in his kingdom, hoping to maybe avoid them from experiencing some of the personal hurt, the embarrassment, the trauma that he has gone through. But as you'll see in today's message, sometimes, just like me in my childhood and sometimes still today as an adult, man, I don't always choose to listen to the wisdom and the advice that has been given to me. And so today we're going to have this story where Belshazzar should have seen. He should have heard and he should have listened to the advice that was given to him, but he missed it. He chose instead to live in arrogance until one night at a lavish dinner party, something changes. Something changes. So today we're going to talk about this writing on the wall, and I want you to see first that it's not just a phrase that we use in our English language about when something is coming, you can see the writing on the wall, something bad is coming. But today it's actually a literal moment in history, in time, in the Bible. And so actually before we even dive in, I'm just going to read a chunk together here at the beginning. I'm going to read from verse 20 through to 28. And there's a reason I'm actually going toward the end of this, because I want you to see where we're headed. I want you to see where this story shapes out so that there is no confusion as to where this journey will end. So if you would, join me. Daniel chapter 5, starting in verse 22, it says this. And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all of this. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you. And you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drank wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which you do not see or hear or know. But the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. Then from his presence the hand was sent, and the writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, mene, tekel, and parsin. And this is the interpretation of the matter. Don't miss this. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and has brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and you have been found wanting. Paris, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. See, I go ahead and I gave you what it meant already here at the beginning, instead of waiting till the end, because I want you to see this journey that we're going to go on. This morning, you're going to see that God is calling Belshazzar's number, and his number didn't add up. God is weighing Belshazzar's worth, and he's tipping the scales a little light. So today, as you see the end of this story, I want to ask you the question this morning. What about us? Are the things that we hold on to so tightly, are they worth the cost that they cost? The things that we work ourselves so hard for, do those things really add up? Or maybe it's instead looking at our time and think about, what do we spend the vast majority of our time on? Do they hold their weight? And let me remind you here from a verse from 1 Samuel, for the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. This isn't just a message for dads, this is for anybody in the room. What are you living for? Where are you finding your worth? And the question I want you to begin to wrestle with is, does it really measure up? Let's pray as we get started today. Dear God, would you move this morning? Would you get me out of the way and would you speak? God, we know that you are already here in this place, moving through worship. God, would you continue to move through the preaching of your word? We love you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, so again, we are in Daniel chapter 5. And like I said, if you've been with us for these first 4 chapters, you know about the story of Nebuchadnezzar. But if you haven't, let me catch you up here really, really quickly. All right, King Nebuchadnezzar ruled for about 43 years. And King Nebuchadnezzar had highs and he had lows. Right? And literally last week we saw the perfect picture from being in the kingdom, being a king, to being cast out and eating grass in the field. That's a perfect snapshot of King Nebuchadnezzar's time and power. It was up and it was down. It was highs and it was lows, and it was moments where God showed up and God was God. So basically after 43 years, he dies and the kingdom is passed on to his son. And then it was passed on to a stepson and then passed on to a grandson. Basically there was this revolving door, and it was a lot of different issues, fighting, killing, sickness. Basically, this gets us to the journey here in between chapter 4 and chapter 5 where we land on Belshazzar. All right, Belshazzar, like I said, is more than likely King Nebuchadnezzar's grandson from Belshazzar's mom's side. I know it sounds a little bit like a soap opera, but bear with me, okay? There's a lot of things going on in between the chapters, and so if you didn't read your historical context this week, you are now caught up. It's a wild journey, but I also need you to recognize that Belshazzar in this moment is actually not the king in charge. His dad is, and I cannot pronounce his name. I'm going to call him Neb. His dad, Neb, is actually the king of Babylon at this time, but he is away from the kingdom. And there's either two things that are happening. He's away somewhere else, living lavishly in some other kingdom, some other part of the world, or the more likely thing is that he's already been captured because Babylon is actually surrounded by 2 armies. All right, so this is where we stand, chapter 5. We've got Belshazzar, who is standing in the place of his dad, and it's surrounded. It's surrounded. He's about to be captured. And I want you to see, because normally you're thinking like, okay, I'm standing in for my dad. It's not really my responsibility, but I know I have to keep this kingdom somehow afloat because either my dad's been captured or he's gone. And I look out my window and there's armies everywhere. But I want you to see how this story kicks off. Daniel chapter 5, I want you to see of what's important to Belshazzar. Belshazzar is all about the party. We show up here in chapter 5, and you read through the first 3 verses, and you'll see he's about throwing a party. He's all about his wives and his concubines. He's about the alcohol that's flowing. He's about the flex of the wealth and the power as he brings in gold that was used in the Israelites' time to worship God. See, he's living this lifestyle of being a king, but actually not actually living out any of their responsibility. The only way I could really describe this in modern day terms that came to me is he's your ancient time Nepo baby. All right? He's a Nepo baby. He didn't really earn any of the things that he's enjoying, and he's just living it out. He's living it out. So like I said, in this time, he's living in this place, throwing a party when his literal kingdom is surrounded by 2 different armies. And so let's take a quick side note, because this is Father's Day, so I want to speak to you really quick, dads, really quick. Really quick. I want you to see the importance of your actions. I want you to see the importance of your actions. Because you see, Belshazzar, he looked and he learned from the people that came before him. From his dad, from his grandfather. He could read the history logs and see the things that they did. And I would almost say that he took what they did and then he multiplied it times 10. He just juiced it up, added some steroid to it, and went. Dads, this is important. Because whether you think so or not, you've got people looking at you. Your son, your daughter is looking at you. They're looking at you. And so are you living a lifestyle that you'd be happy to know that they multiplied it by 10? Would you be happy with your lifestyle, how you're living, and how you're showing them if you looked 20, 30, 40 years down the road and you saw your child doing what you did, but times 10, times 50, times 100? Because they're looking. Whether you know it or not, they're watching. That wasn't really in the text. That's just a free little note for dads in the room. Okay, I just want you to see. Belshazzar didn't just pick up these things from nowhere. He learned from somebody. Dads, they're learning from somebody. They're watching. All right, let's hop back in. See, Belshazzar, he's arrogant. That's something that we would also have described King Nebuchadnezzar as, arrogant. He's thinking that his city, his kingdom, Babylon, would stand up without him having to do any work because he knew of all the infrastructure and the layers and the things that had been done to keep Babylon safe. And perhaps maybe the worst part of this moment, this party, is in verse 3 when he's taking the sacraments of God and he's instead filling with wine to get drunk to celebrate the false gods of their kingdom. What an open act of complete disregard for a holy God. And as you read through this text, you're probably thinking like, that's so far out there. Like, this guy is wild. This guy is crazy. I don't even know where this fits in. But I want you to take a second and I want you to think. In case you have forgotten that we live in a culture that does these same things. We live in a culture that's all about numbing your pain so that you don't have to really face your reality. Right? Just like an impending attack from an army here in this, we're under a spiritual attack every day. And instead of recognizing that, instead we'll go get intoxicated with lust, we'll get high on self-gratification, and we'll get drunk on wealth and power. When you take this for a second, you can see that Belshazzar is actually not too far off from our mankind. Belshazzar is a mere image of culture around us. The do what makes you happy, live for your own pleasure, pursuit of holiness, that's wild. You wouldn't do that. You see, Belshazzar, I think, would actually fit in well today. He's wrapped up in doing what makes him happy. He's wrapped up in fulfilling the pleasures of his own life so that he doesn't have to really deal with the reality around him. And here in Daniel 5, we have this wake-up call. Daniel 5, verse 5 says, immediately, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote, and the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. Life is going great. He's happy. He's enjoying the pleasure until this quick wake-up call. And actually, I learned this story from VeggieTales. I don't know about you guys. I was a church kid growing up. I learned this from VeggieTales, and it didn't really show me exactly what this verse actually meant. This week in preparation, I actually find that this translation, the ESV, actually leaves a little bit out. Here's a more literal translation of the response that the king had. A more literal translation would read like this: the joints of his loins loosened. I mean, you have to think about that for a second. This is a moment of fear. So much fear that he makes a mess. The king, everybody's watching him. It's his party. In this moment, he is so afraid that he makes a mess. And I was reading commentary through this week, and I saw people that were complaining like, oh, how could God do that? How could God do that? And then you realize as you talk to people, and maybe this is you, you've been in this situation where you only really listen to God whenever you're covered in your own mess. Sometimes you have to get so dirty and disgusting of things that you have thought that were going to fulfill your life. You don't listen to God until you're covered in your own mess. This moment, Belshazzar he's being shook. He's being woken up. He's realizing here really quickly that you don't mess with the holy God. You don't get to openly mock who he is and get away with it. So really, no matter how much social status you might think you have, no much power you think you possess, as a reminder in Romans 14, every knee bows, every tongue will confess that God is God. Period. It's the end of the story. Even if it takes you getting yourself covered in your own mess. I saw a quote this way: Belshazzar's carefree partying was so shallow that it turned from happy to terrified in a moment. But the reason we think that his conscience shows, or his demeanor changes so quickly, is because his conscience was active beneath his partying. And that's a word for some of us because we do a pretty good job of hiding behind things. We do a pretty good job of filling our calendar up or going to that event or doing this or doing that so that we don't really have to deal with our own insecurities. We fill up our schedule with so much things so that we don't have to worry about our blemishes. We fill ourselves up with these pleasures because we don't want to have to actually deal with the things that are our reality. Instead, we'd rather numb and we'd rather dumb it all away. And in moments like this, you come face to face with the Holy God. And so really, every single person in this room, here's a reminder. Romans 14 is for you too. Every single one of us will come face to face with the Holy God. Every single one of us. It's not something that you can avoid or get out of, no matter how big your checking account is, no matter how big your house is, no matter how full your calendar is. You don't get to get out of this. So that question I ask you again, do you measure up? In this moment in the text, we see that Belshazzar knows he doesn't measure up. So what he does is he does like his grandfather before him, and he runs to the fake. He runs to the spiritual gurus, the cheap tricks, the false prophets, hoping that they can tell him some kind of interpretation that doesn't seem so bad. Until this moment, the queen, who is actually more than likely not his wife but his mom, says, hey, remember, there was a man of God named Daniel. I know it's Father's Day, but shout out to the moms who are also leading your kids back to the truth. I know I had a mom who loved me like that. So thanks, Mom. She remembered, hey, remember that guy? There was a holy one. He was of the holy God. He was a man who chased after the one holy God. Remember him. Remember him. And so believers, this is a word for you too. Sometimes we feel like our witness isn't really going anywhere. We're living the right way and all we do is get made fun of or get left out or get passed over. Let me remind you, your witness matters. Your witness matters, and it may not be in this moment. It may be years from now, just like in this story, but somebody's going to say, remember that guy, remember that girl. They lived differently. They walked with the holy God. And they may not have had all the answers and all the things right, but we know who they walked with. Yeah. Your witness matters. So parents in the room that maybe you have a child who has wandered off from the faith, your witness matters. Students who are in a school, not right now, but are in school during the school year, your witness matters. Those of you that show up to your office space where you may be the only Christian there, your witness matters. Every single day that we go out, our witness matters because, just like for dads, people are watching. And in a moment when people need truth, I pray that you're the one they give a phone call to. So back in elementary school, some of y'all may not know this about me. Back in elementary school, I used to get in a little bit of trouble. Now, it wasn't anything wild. It wasn't anything crazy, but I was semi-smart in elementary school. And so I would usually finish my work first, and then I would start to play around. I start to throw paper at people, or one time I glued this guy to his chair. It was really funny. The teacher didn't think so. I thought it was funny. I used to talk a lot. I used to get frustrated whenever I wouldn't be called on to answer the question. And sometimes I would even show my disgust by banging on the desk or doing something like that, right? I wasn't the most gifted at behavior when I was in elementary school. All right, but because I was pretty smart, I typically could figure out pretty quickly how far I could push my teacher until she got to that point. And then right when she got to that point, I'd back off, right? There was this one time I remember I'm in elementary school, and it was toward the beginning of the year, so I didn't really know my teacher all that well. And so here I was doing my typical class clown stuff. Yeah, there's some troublemakers in here that know what I'm talking about. I was going and I was pushing and I was doing these things, and finally, the most terrifying words that I could hear as an elementary age student. This is in the 90s, so bear with me. I'm going to call home. And what made it even a little more scary was that she'd say, oh, you know what? I'm going to call your dad. Because I knew what that meant. And so, of course, as a troublemaker, I'd flip the switch and I'd go from class clown to class saint, and I would sit there with some kind of hope that maybe she would forget to call dad, and so that when I got home, it'd be okay. Again, I know there's troublemakers in here that are identifying with this right at this very moment. You might be having some PTSD, some flashbacks. It's okay, we're going to get through this. Right, she would call home, and I remember my dad, after he'd punish me and do some, things that I remember vividly, he would tell me, son, you know better. And he was right. Of course I knew better. Yet somehow I would think that I could somehow get away with it. Of course, I knew better. Here in Daniel 5, verse 17, we pick back up this story. And as Daniel begins to tell the interpretation of what's on the wall, he looks at Belshazzar and he says, you should have known better. You had the writing on the wall before the actual writing on the wall. Look back through the historical documents. Look back through what's going on. You should have known better. Yet somehow you think that you could get away with it? See, humility wasn't one of the descriptions that we use to describe Belshazzar. Seeking wisdom wasn't one of the descriptions that we use to describe Belshazzar. And he looks at him and he says, how did you miss this? And it's easy for us as we're sitting in our chairs on Sunday morning doing the things that we feel like we're supposed to do to kind of miss this point. I saw this quote from a commentary this week. It's too good to not share. If God held Belshazzar responsible for the ray of light which shone across his pathway, what would he say to us living in the blaze of light which illuminates the world today? Every unconverted human in this country has more light now than Belshazzar ever did. I think some of us have to sit with that for a moment. We look at this story and we're like, man, how did he miss it? How did he miss that sign? And he had just a little ray of light. And yet we have the whole sun shining on us and we still miss it. There are people in this room who have heard this before. They've heard about this holy God. They know that there's going to be a judgment day. They know these things, but they still feel like, you know what? I'm on my time. I can live for me. I can do what I want. I can be like me in elementary school and just push the boundaries and the boundaries and the boundaries because I know when to stop. I can live a holy life when I get older. I can clean up my act whenever I become a dad or a mom. I can fix it when I get married. Or you know what, hey, once the kids are out the house, life slows down, then I can start living for Jesus. I just got to get that promotion and then I can get back to church. You fill in the blank. What's your excuse? See, we don't get to live this certain way when we have been told the truth of God. We have heard it. We have seen it. It's time to face the music. Daniel reminds us of this in verse 23. The God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all of your ways, you've not glorified. There's too many of us. There's too many of us in church living this lifestyle. There's too many of us living with this idea that I get to do what I want on my own time when I want. Simply not the truth. It's simply not the truth. This life it's not your own. This life is not your own. The last thing you want to do is wake up one day and realize it's too late. You look back on the things that you spent your time on, the things you chased after, and you realize like that wasn't worth it. Why did I climb that ladder? Why did I devote so much time to that thing? And really, it actually just pulled me away from God, didn't bring me any closer to him. Let me encourage you this morning, dig deep into the well that is Jesus. Dig deep into the well and find purpose, find joy, find hope. Remember that you're actually called to live for something much greater than yourself. So verse 24 picks back up where we started this morning. Then from his presence the hand was sent and the writing was inscribed. Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. God has numbered the days of your kingdom. You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting, and your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. The writing is on the wall. Every single one of us will stand before a holy God. And you'll be held up, measured and weighed, and you'll be asked, do you measure up? And here's the thing, I can save you the trouble, the worry, the fear, the anxiety about the answer to that question. You don't measure up. I don't measure up. We collectively don't measure up. That's the answer. No, we don't measure up. And if I closed the iPad and I walked off the stage and left you with that, it'd be a pretty terrible message. You see, here first you have to realize that we are all Belshazzars. Our natural reaction, our natural humankind, mankind is to always be drawn back to the things that bring us pleasure. We've been counted and we found to have not added up. We've been weighed and found lacking. But later in the book of Daniel, in fact, just a few chapters later, which I won't spoil it because, we're going to get there in a couple weeks. But you have to know, the story of Daniel doesn't end here. Just a few chapters later, he begins to tell a vision of the Son of Man. He begins to tell this vision of one who is coming. And now here, thousands of years later, we have the sun shining brightly. Jesus was everything we needed. When we didn't measure up, when we didn't add up, he did. I have to realize that I'll never be the man, the father, the husband, the pastor, the leader. I'll never be exactly what I want to be. I'll always fall short as to what's compared to a holy God. But thanks be to him that it's not on me. Thanks to God that he sent his son who lived the perfect life and then died in my place, paying the price that I couldn't pay. And it wasn't just death, but it was life as he rose back from the dead. And when he did, he held sin, death, hell, the grave in his hand, conquered. Reminds me of Galatians 3. But Christ has rescued us from the curse pronounced by the law when he was hung on the cross. He took upon himself the curse for our wrongdoing. For as it's written in scriptures, cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree. Through Christ Jesus, God has blessed the Gentiles with the same blessing that he promised to Abraham so that we who are believers might receive the promised Holy Spirit through faith. You see, the writing is on the wall. The writing is on the wall. Our number is being called. It's our time to step up to the scale, and we're going to be found lacking. And although the devil gets excited about that part, thinking that we've somehow been conquered, we get to stand and remind him that there's more power, There's more joy, there's more love, there's more hope, there's more grace, there's more healing, there's more contentment, found not in anything that we could do or achieve, but found in the one who did the measuring up. So maybe you've never heard this. I just want you to hear this here straight. You will never measure up, but there is somebody who did. And his name is Jesus. And he measured up to far beyond your wildest expectations. He stands in our place. He did then, he does now, and he will forever. And because of him, salvation has come. And so when you see the writing on the wall, it's not a terror story. It's not a terror story. There's hope in this. Because although we needed to measure up, salvation came so that we don't have to. So really, as I invite the band back up, I want to just talk to a couple of different groups in the crowd today. I don't know where this message hits you at on your spectrum, but I want to speak to a couple of different groups today. First, to my dads. First, to the fathers in the room. What a better way to lead your family than by learning and leading from Christ the Father. There is absolutely no better way for you to be a dad than by starting first with getting your relationship with Christ right. It's actually a direct opposite approach from what the culture around you is saying. No, you don't have to spend more, do more to go and achieve your dreams so that your kids will somehow love and admire you. Here we're seeing that Jesus is saying, no, lay it down. Give it up. Because no matter what you do, you won't measure up. But then he reminds you that you don't have to. So dads, if you're feeling like you're in this season of no hope, you just can't get it right, here in a moment, I'm going to challenge you to do something out of the box and go find somebody on our prayer team, one of our pastors, and just say, I'm a dad and I'm struggling, and they'll know what to do. And there's other people in this room today that as you sit here and you look, maybe you've never heard this story of a writing on the wall. But as you hear this story, you realize that, man, I've been trying to cover up my flaws, my pains, my pressures, my hurts. I've been trying to numb it and dumb it with all the things that culture around me says will bring me pleasure. But as I'm here today, I'm broken. The writing on the wall is that judgment has come. But in just a few sentences, you see that judgment came, but salvation also showed up. And so today, you don't have to deal with the fear and the anxiety of that writing on the wall becoming true, because there's hope. Because with this judgment came the opportunity to be saved. And salvation is here this morning if you'll receive it. So there's another group in this room who's been living for things that don't matter. Like you're a Christian, you know that you're a Christian, but you look at your life and you realize that, man, I've been spending too much time doing things that have no spiritual impact. I spend so much energy on things just to make myself feel good, so that somehow I can measure up to the expectations. If you've been around Awaken, you know that one of our core values is that we want to get real, and so today is a good opportunity to get real. Today's a good opportunity for you to be reminded that there is nothing that you can do that achieves God's love for you anymore. You've got it. Today you have the opportunity to ask for forgiveness and to put down the things that you're holding on to so tight so that you can step into what God has for you. So like I said, we're going to have our prayer team, some of our deacons, our pastors around. If you're any of that group or even something I didn't mention, I'm going to encourage you, I'm going to challenge you to get out of your comfort zone, to stand up, go find somebody, and we just want to pray with you. If you're in this moment and you're still wrestling with that, man, you don't have to measure up. There's freedom to be found in a choice to follow Jesus. He paid your cost. The judgment that you deserve, He paid. So God, we just thank you for this message this morning. that yes, although we deserve judgment, we deserve death, you sent your son. You sent your son to say, hey, I've paid it, I've covered it. Will you receive it?